I need one.
Yeah, me too. I don't need them.
I wouldn't say it's serious.
Excuse me.
We just lost the mayor.
There's only 5 participants.
Ready to start.
He's got a gavel.
All right, I call this meeting to order. Please rise for pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson. Here. Mrs. Moore. Here. Mr. Shaboo,
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here. Okay, I will now call to order the public hearing on ordinance 2022-0-19. If you could please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-19, third reading, amended. An ordinance creating chapter 1255, planned unit development, PUD district of the codified ordinances.
The law director, please provide a brief explanation of the ordinance.
Yes, I will. Thank you. This is a new chapter to city lines for planning unit development. According to that guidelines that set forth in the ordinance. The ordinance sets forth what the density can be, what the setback can be, the approval process through planning commission, the council, the agreement, sign agreement with the developer. Development. This ordinance creates what's called an overlay district in the areas that are specified.
Doing it on purpose.
You're online, please mute your line.
So if the applicant meets all the guidelines that we discussed both before and also during this approval process, they can go forward with development. They can go further, but I think they could.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience on the ordinance? Hearing none, we will now hear from persons who wish to speak in favor of the ordinance. If you'd like to speak in favor of the ordinance, please step to the lectern, give your name and address for the record. We'll now hear from persons who wish to speak against the ordinance. Again, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Earl Curris, and I live at 7523 Salida Woods, Salida Road. This PUD, the way it's written, is just, it's a continuation of the poor experience we have experienced since we started this whole process. Over 8 months ago, we have wanted to build a city plan, wanted to come up with a vision, wanted to come up with good things. We were able to get past a moratorium in regards to the Dollar General store. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but our council added line 4 to this moratorium, which I've looked through all the other moratoriums and they don't have it. But our council ill-advised us to dedicate 15% of shelf
Excuse me,
space.
this is related to the
Okay,
PUD,
so
not
I'm gonna
to.
go to the PUD now. So now, nobody in the city of Meadow on the Lake wanted this Dollar General. So what we're going to do is let's reward the Dollar General for coming to our city, and let's extend the PUD to their land. So that now, in the blueprints that they just showed us at the last meeting, they can put more high-density housing behind the Dollar General, because we're going to allow it with the PUD. The only reason I even thought about doing this PUD again was because we're getting blackmailed by the developer at Summers Group. And it's the best of two evils. So now we're caving to the Dollar General with nobody in the city wants, and we're going to give them an open check, open ticket to build all the high-density housing behind the Dollar General. Then we're going to turn around and we're caving to the Summers Group, and the reason being is because the R-top was left in the zoning. And the R-top is from the 70s, and it's ridiculous. So the way this zoning reads, this PUD reads, I am dead against it, because I don't want it that, we're trying to minimize damage, not just expand it. And I'm just afraid that the way it's written, we're just expanding to the detriment of our city. That's all.
Anyone else?
I'm Jeff Schick, 7533 Salida. Sorry I was late for the earlier meeting. I didn't realize there was so much going on. But about the PUD, let me reinforce what Mr. Curris said. The fact that it was expanded south does create a bit of an opportunity for more exploitation of our city by non-resident developers, by non-resident builders, by nobody committed to the city's well-being financially, other than to take money out. I believe a PUD is a smart choice for this city after we have a master plan, after we have a plan that looks at the entire commercial district, that looks at all of the resident issues, that understands our community politically, both vertically integrated through Ohio and up through the federal government, so that we can understand how to actually maximize political relationships and not give away property to people who don't live here. I'll grant you, Mrs. Crane probably paid a lot of taxes. I know Mr. Summers never paid taxes in this city. I know everybody here is paying taxes in the city. Everybody there is paying taxes in this city. We're granting an exclusionary relationship to people who will take money out of pockets every single month. From Mentor on the Lake to Chardon, from Mentor on the Lake to Pittsburgh, from Mentor on the Lake to Nashville. It doesn't make sense. I understand that there was a negotiation between the developer, and we read a letter from the developer's attorney. We didn't negotiate with Dollar General at all. We couldn't tell you the name of the person from Dollar General responsible for this property and that developer. That developer is a privately held family business in Pennsylvania. The number of employees that Dollar General will bring to this town is remarkably tiny.
Yeah, I'm gonna remind you, this is not about the Dollar General, this is about the PUD.
The PUD is including that activity. The PUD is a great idea for an entire city to be able to use. It's now targeted toward two individuals in Lake County, and they don't do any business here, haven't done business here, haven't lived here at all in their lives. It's unfortunate. I'm way against it. And if you can pull any magic out of your hat like you did last time, I urge you to do that. And I urge every council member to remember the reason we voted it down is we were being exploited. That's not changing tonight. We're being further exploited by the same two entities. The PUD is a manipulative tool that doesn't benefit this city at this time.
Anybody else like to speak?
I want to jump in.
Testuri 7373, Salida. I agree with what was said earlier. I do not think we need the PUD. And for those reasons, and I want to remind everyone about a couple other obstacles that I think are in the way. One, you look at a weakening home market. The National Association of Realtors is acknowledging a slowdown in construction. Buyer demand is plummeting. Interest rates are at 7% right now and creeping up. They may get up to 8%. There is a possible looming the recession. That's the word I was thinking of. A recession it's messing with the markets. It's a possibility. My question is, with these 37 homes that this PUD would allow, I'm thinking with rising material costs, freight charges, and these are luxury high-end homes. What is the ticket price? Possibly, let's say mid 200s, maybe. Let's go 200. If that was, what is the median household going for in Mentor on the Lake? Where are these people going to be coming from? That type of resident, wouldn't they want amenities, their kids to swim in a pool, or there's what brings them to Mentor on the Lake when our own leadership has said no one's knocking down the door to come to Mentor on the Lake? If businesses don't want to come here, why does high-end housing? Why do people want to establish and live here if we haven't even put in place something that will make their lives better than wherever they're coming from? So I'm not saying this is an easy path to get us to the very end, but I think taking this step today makes that end product so extremely unlikely, it's not even silly. I know I've said it before. I know people have heard that there's nothing going with that restaurant on Mentor Beach Park. It is not dead in the water. It's two municipalities that have to come to one determination to make something work. It's very problematic. I'm not telling you guys that because you've been living that for 10 years or more. But it can be done if we, I think that's where something like a master plan might help. You know, either align with Mentor, get Mentor aligned with us, hash that out. It's not gonna be easy, but if we can do that, or heck, sell it to a third party and then let them take on the multiple $1,000,000 risk. But we enact this PUD today, which I think would be a grave mistake. The one opportunity that we would have to really build a robust Mentor on the Lake, not a robust Shaker or a robust, you know, big city. This is Mentor on the Lake. That 2.57 acre property could really be dynamic. Housing that might sit empty or might get bought and go to rentals is not dynamic. It doesn't bring anything to our city. So please look at the obstacles that come along with this choice, because I realize it went to 3 readings and that's fantastic, but there was discussion. I don't recall a council as a whole where you all can hash your opinions and you can discuss things. Who did you hear from in the community, or was it just at these meetings? I really think the bulk of the people that were against it in the first place, and very grateful that you all voted it down, are still of the mindset that we don't need the PUD. Let them build under our current ordinances. I do believe if it is 55 and up apartments, there is nothing terrible about that. For planning and zoning, it's a better use of land, it's better utilized. It is the density issue, and I believe we'll be going through some density education a little later in the program. That's the levity. Anyway, I just think we're making a mistake with the PUD for those reasons and more, and hopefully there'll be someone else who wants to fill in any gaps I missed. Well, thank you.
Anyone else?
My hand, 73, so I don't know, you're shocked I'm up here, I'm sure. We're all tired. Dave thought I was Kevin. Earl forgot what street he lived on. That's how tired we are of all this, without a doubt. But before we go forward, I just wanted to say that we had a loss in the community that I think a lot of people know about. Maybe not everybody, but we had a fire over the weekend and somebody lost their home. And I'm hoping everybody can step up and we can find out ways that we can help the family. We need Crystal here, if that's okay for me to share. To help them get back on their feet, her with kids in the house and lost the whole thing. So I don't know if there's I don't know how to do that stuff. If anybody does, I think it'd be great if we could step up and do something that would be helpful, because that's extremely tragic. Much more tragic than anything we're dealing with, even though we're all wiped out. So I wrote out a letter that I will send to all of you. I'm just going to read it because there's so many different variants where we can go. Everybody has so many different thoughts. It's a very complicated issue. We've been talking about it forever. You have the PUD, you have Dollar General, you have the Summer Street, you have Lane Crane, you have the master plan. There's just so many things that are going on that it's difficult to try to be concise. So apologies in advance. I'm deeply disappointed that I again feel compelled to come and speak at a council meeting regarding a PUD that shouldn't even be back up for any serious consideration, yet it is. This PUD was created for a developer and with an eye towards one specific parcel in our town. Many have been up in arms over this, passionately speaking their minds over several months this year. The community was asked to learn about and participate respectfully in the process. We did that. I know I did. But people have grown tired and feel their opinions have been ignored, disrespected, deemed irrelevant, however you want to reference it. The bottom line is that many feel their council members don't listen, so why bother? I've heard this over and over and over again when out speaking to people in the community. It's a sad situation. I personally volunteered countless hours of my time towards this issue. I'm doing it because I care about our community and its future. It's not my elected duty. I took no oath. I don't get paid anything, nor do I receive any retirement benefits. On the contrary, council members do. Voters have elected you and entrusted you to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our community. We're counting on you to ensure a successful future for our town. If the wrong choice is made here, it cannot be undone. While the Art option was a surprise to the citizens of this community, it should not have been to the elected officials tasked with knowing, managing, and legislating our codes. The 55+ option was already on the table in advance of the July vote when the PUD was turned down. Elaine Crane herself came out here beforehand and spoke at length, which would be an understatement, about how she wanted the corner to be a place to form off. In other words, 55+ development. So nothing has changed, or certainly nothing should have changed with the PUD. The fact that Ms. Crane is determined to build residential doesn't mean that she can. She has to develop her property within our zoning codes. Why in God's name are we bending over backwards to accommodate her in a space that only a few years ago, everyone on council thought should be commercial? And this is being done in contrast to what the citizens clearly expressed as desired. It's such a slap in the face to the community. Yes, we are potentially faced with what are deemed to be two lousy residential development options. Maybe so, or maybe not. Regardless, voting down the PUD puts the corner back to being developed within our existing ordinances and prevents denser residential behind Dollar General, which is what they currently have on their plans for the church site. At least the last PUD prevented more dense housing behind Dollar General, where this version of the PUD allows it. Without the PUD, the property owner and developer must work together within our codes and develop the parcel as the city intended with mixed use. If not mixed use, that may mean 55+ apartments. At least that proposed development will be less dense and a better use of the green space than the condos. Each of the 55+ units are dramatically smaller in size, and the footprint of the actual units per acre is 35% less than the proposed condo development. The minimum number of parking spaces is half of what is required for the condos, which means fewer cars, less traffic. Occupancy would be on average around 110 for the 55+ and around 95 for the condos. And I have a chart I'll share with you in a moment. Pass the PUD and see dense residential at the corner and at the church at a time when market conditions are deteriorating. Slowing home sales, supply shortages, rising material costs, lack of labor, and rising interest rates could lead to sales challenges. This could leave us with another scenario where what starts out as ownership turns to becoming rentals, or even worse, subsidized rentals. Or condo owners can simply opt to individually rent out their units. Is there anything in our code that prevents a condo owner from subletting their condo? The massive aging baby boomer population seeking carefree living is less likely to be affected by these market fluctuations. The 55+ apartment trend is usually nicer accommodations for empty nesters. Those 55+ developments are nowhere near the style or function of an assisted living facility. These are housing options in high demand, usually well-funded from folks selling their family homes and opting for a more relaxed, lower maintenance option. Again, funding usually isn't a problem. As well, they tend to be neater and more prideful of their residences, even if rented. They have fewer occupants, thus fewer cars, and they aren't so old that they need EMS every day as some want to claim. As I've stated before, there's no reason to have the PUD back on the agenda. We've been there, done that. Nothing's changed. The 55+ option was a permissible one on the table that was discussed prior to the last vote. If some were not aware, chose to ignore it, or thought it wasn't likely to happen, that's not on us. Don't make us pay for that lapse. Hold the course and limit any developer to working within our existing codes without variances and without any tax breaks to properly preserve our city. As always, thank you for your time and consideration. I just have copies of this letter along with some chart comparison of density. So, and I'll email it to you as well for the record. But there is the little, you do have that chart already shown. Try to get in there under 10 minutes.
Anyone else like to speak? Do members of council wish to comment on the ordinance?
Mr. President. I've made my stance clear before. I'm against the PUD. I'm against high density housing for safety factors. Unfortunately, the city did have a structure. It was pretty much a total loss. And I feel bad for Crystal because she's a sweet lady. But our fire department isn't equipped to handle a high density housing. Willoughby had a fire in a high density housing last year. They lost 3 units, I believe. And their fire department was right down the street, and they are a fully staffed fire department. Thank God nobody got hurt or died in that fire. I would not want to support anything that would put anybody in jeopardy like that. I agree with what the residents have said. It's not good for our city now. It won't be good for the city in the future. That, you've all heard my complaints, my comments, so I'm opposed to it.
I'll say that I was very purposeful when I amended the PUD originally to be north of Linden. The change to Sharon was definitely not something I approve of.
I personally would go back to north of Linden, if that's so a choice. The owner occupied does to me sound much more appealing than rentals. You do have more at stake in it as a owner occupied. I'm not opposed.
I would agree with Mr. Bittner and Mr. Johnson, and also add back in their mixed use.
I would agree with Desiree, mixed use, definitely.
I think mixed use would fall under what it is now.
I think what,
Or what do you?
if I'm not mistaken, what she's saying is that to incorporate that into a requirement of the PUD.
Are you suggesting as an amendment for tonight?
Get to that when we get to legislation.
We'll get to legislation.
Does anyone else wish to speak on council?
I think a lot of what we're hearing too is over the last several meetings, coming from the residents is, there's been a lot of talk about, we don't want rentals, we want home ownership. Now, tonight, I'm hearing the opposite. We're okay with rentals, not the high density housing. There are people on both sides of this who are pro rental, who are pro home ownership. And it's a very tough decision.
I just want to say that the last proposal from Summers on the 55 plus apartments is the best use and design on that property. And if we just left it as it is, that's probably the best answer that we can.
Okay. We will now close this public hearing at 7:26 p.m. On to the approval of the minutes. Regular meeting of council from October 25th, 2022. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Morris for approval. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Correspondence. Clerk, is there any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence.
Does any member of council have correspondence tonight?
Yes, Mr. President. I do.
Yes.
So, I received an email from Tess Story. I think people had asked for a copy of her money to be able to send that out. She responded saying, thanks for sending this. Michelle, is this really going to be up for third reading vote on November 7th? At second reading this past Tuesday, some on council hadn't even seen the amended PUD as the revisions were completed that same day. How many of you on council actually read the amended documents it was said there were only 2 minor changes, but regardless, everyone on council should have had the opportunity to read it through thoroughly before the decision to move on to third reading public hearing. There was at least one person on council who didn't know why the PUD was back up for review. That's troubling to say the least. If I understand protocol correctly, having the PUD up for reading at council meetings only would not give you council the opportunity to share your individual opinions, concerns, and potential consequences. Is that correct? Was there a council meeting of the whole that I missed? Wouldn't a meeting of the whole be wise under these circumstances? Roughly 2 months ago, virtually the same PUD was voted down by the majority of council, and now it's being pushed through rather urgently with what seems like little to no dialogue. As I said at Tuesday's meeting, the council got the issue of the PUD right the first time. One reason for the PUD coming back was that a few residents preferred ownership over rentals, and that senior living would put too large a burden on our city services. And council agreed in part or enough to meet with Elaine, Crane, and Summers group. Was this all of council, 1 or 2 members? Was all of council aware that this was being discussed with the property owner and developer? A few thoughts on senior living. Many moved to senior living due to the loss of a spouse, 1 person per dwelling. Fewer trips, less driving, open space less likely to be riddled with things. On townhomes, families with 1 child equals 3 per dwelling. Many families have 2 cars, yards, open space, more likely to be cluttered with things. It's not a cut and dry choice. Both options have downsides. Why not give yourselves the opportunity to think about them at length before rushing into a decision? Told that your constituents matter to you as a group. If circumstances have changed and your decisions have changed accordingly, then those details need to be brought to light. If your decision has changed and the PUD basically remains the same Summers project, same parameters, then we deserve to know the reason behind a change of opinion. Usually when people make a decision and feel good about the reason why they are readily offered up lengthy tests. I responded and let her know, thanks for your input. The PUD will be a public hearing and the third reading at the November 7th meeting. Natural progression of legislation moves each meeting to the next reading, example for a second vote. Unless tabled or sent to committee, then the legislation naturally progresses. The PUD was sent to planning and zoning, who made recommendations and did their job. The amended version was accepting the changes they made into the language of the ordinance. We have 14 days to review the amended version before the November 7th meeting, based on the date we received the version. The changes were discussed in an open council meeting and passed by vote. Being prepared for meetings includes reviewing legislation timely and prior to that meeting. I would hope that other council members take this position seriously and do what I do by reading all correspondence for anything timely. I would hope all council members come prepared for all meetings. As far as your meeting question, I cannot speak on this matter. If people have meetings I have not been invited to or at, I cannot provide feedback. I have heard other council members have attended meetings, including meetings with residents to which only certain council members were invited. Unfortunately, those council members are not providing information or feedback to other council members. The president and vice president are sometimes included in meetings but unable to speak on the matter. I will submit your emails, correspondence at the meetings with documented and recorded. If you have further questions or anything else, please let me know. As responded, thank you for submitting my previous emails correspondence. Although very well written, the response is a bit mechanical. For instance, I wasn't asking for details of the meetings with council members and residents, simply whether or not you and others on council were aware of it. But I get it, nobody really likes to put actual content emails because you can't take it back. I do think that any council member who changes their mind and votes the PUD through does owe their constituents and MOL residents explanations as to why, what has changed, what has come to light, anything that explains such a drastic change. I don't know where you stand on the matter, but I know that you have been diligent and do your homework when it comes to issues that come in front of council. Please continue to hear the voices of as many residents as possible. I'm not alone in thinking that the PUD should not be up again for a vote. Thank you for listening to us.
Any other correspondence tonight? Hearing none, we will move on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eba, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, the public here this evening. Start out, there was an email I sent to council on Wednesday, October 26th. The email had to do with comments that were made at the last council meeting. There are no plans at this time for the restaurant in Center Beach Park. This came from a reliable source employed in the city of Mentor, who handles the economic development area. Also, Mr. Bartone has accepted another position and leaving the city. He's done an outstanding job over the last 6 years. Worked very hard to improve our operations and service. We have started a search for the replacement. Holly's last day will be Friday, November 18th. The fire department report for October. For October, there are 104 calls for service, 22 fire service calls, 82 rescue EMS calls. For those 82 calls, 13 calls were for invalid assist. There were no calls required in our camp. Year to date for 2022 through the third quarter, for a total of 968 calls for service. Out of those, 172 fire service calls, 771 rescue EMS calls. Of those, 190 calls for invalid assist and 8 calls for overdose required in our camp. During our community development meeting last week, Mr. Morris, you brought up a number of expense that went to CT consultants. You mentioned, I think, $38,000 that went to CT for work on Lake Overlook Beach. I gave every council member a copy of this. The expense that was approved, the minutes of June 14, 2022, that was for the architectural and engineering services for the police department improvements. Nothing to do with also from Chief Healing, we had 3 individuals from the police department at the Lake Elementary School front retreat, Officer Messenger, Officer Scarisage, and dispatcher Gene McPeak. He just wanted to thank all 3 for participating. And once again, this event was an outstanding success and one that Lake Elementary students look forward to each year. Also participated was Mr. Moore, Carol Sapinski from the Parks and Recreation Board, Mr. Shaboo and his wife Phyllis, and also Bree Moon. I want to thank all of them for participating. Also from Chief Feeling, we had 2 communication officers, Kristen Story and Shana McCoy. They participated in the Lake County Safety Forces trunk or treat event on Sunday, October 23rd at Lake County Captain City. Again, he's thanking each of them for their participation. One last thing, and this came through today from Jeremy Campaign, who works on fire department. The subject was good news report, which I thought I'd mention. He puts Chief Mayor, we had a Concord resident who had a massive heart attack on Labor Day while shopping in our city. He walked in today to say thank you. He went into cardiac arrest twice while at the hospital, and the doctors told him it was a miracle that he survived, as he had what they call the widowmaker. I looked at the times, and we were at the patient within 90 seconds from the time of dispatch, and had him to the hospital 23 minutes after time of dispatch. And I thought I'd pass that along. They did a great job. That concludes my report.
Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening. I have just a few comments that were made at the public hearing. I think there may be some mistake about the church site. The church site is already included in the art area. So there could be a senior citizen development there. So this PUD really doesn't affect that. There is a moratorium that passed at the last one. It did not make it excuse me, it's a moratorium still in effect. But if there isn't, if that's passed, then nobody can make an application to have on there until council considers that. I think that the 15% Dollar General will have to go forward. I couldn't quite tell when he was saying, when the speaker was saying council, if he was referring to me or if he was referring to council putting that language. I believe that that language came as a result of comments that the residents were making. Residents were making comments about there being a food desert, and that was one of the problems. And so the 15%, I think, actually represented like planning commission. In terms of meetings, if people think that we're having meetings, other than what's been advertised, there aren't any meetings. The open record laws for the state of Ohio require that council, as a whole, can only get together and talk about public business or consider public business when, it's been properly noticed. And that includes committees of council. So anytime that there's a majority of a committee or a majority of council to discuss public business, have to be allowed part of hearing what is happening unless they're in an executive session. And I don't recall any executive session on these particular issues. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think that we have. One thing I think everybody knows, just reconfirm it, senior housing are talking about Crane property or the church property, if they have available, would be apartments, rental apartments, by anyone. It could be owned by someone in the community to own that apartment complex, or it could be owned by somebody outside. But that wouldn't be owner occupied instead. And it's one of the big differences between rentals and the Artark area and the senior. And I just wanted to have that on the record. Other than that, I don't have anything further.
Thank you. Questions of the administration and department heads? Hearing none, we'll move on to board committee commission reports. Ordinance committee.
Ordinance committee, we met on November 1st at 6 p.m. We discussed rentals. The first thing that we talked about was the inspection fees. I think we're going to propose to council 2 to 5 homes have a $100 inspection fee, 6 to 10 homes, $150 inspection fee, 11 to 20, $250, 21 plus, $350. We also discussed having a homeowner do a 5-year inspection. Every 5 years, an inspection be performed on the house, and that be filed with the city. And also being filed with the city, the renter's name, contact details, and discussed having a checklist for annual operations that the landlords or the owners would have on there. Examples would be running water, any leaks, are the gutters clean, are the gutters leaking? We also discussed having, instead of a certified home inspector here at the city from our service department, just doing exterior zoning inspections, which would be $30 per house, and that inspection would happen every 3 years. Our meeting adjourned at 6:43 p.m.
Community development.
Yes, Mr. President, the Community Development Committee met on November 1st at 7 p.m. Present was myself, Desiree Thompson, Dave Shaboo, Kevin Bittner, Rob Johnson, Mary Eva, and many residents. The meeting started with an active discussion concerning the work on the vision statement and the mission statement. We agreed to set the next meeting on November 16th at 7 p.m. to further the project. Everyone present seemed engaged with the project. The Envision Group and all of Mentor Lake businesses will be invited to attend the meeting. And it adjourned at 7:55 p.m.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Planning and zoning met November 7th tonight, started at 6 p.m. The purpose of the meeting was MS property preliminary site plan. In attendance of Al Busher, Mike Sweeney, Brent Moore, myself, Janelle Muscatel, Dave Eva, Paul Morris, Michelle Moore, Rob Johnson, and several residents. MSC Properties of Ohio is seeking approval for a preliminary site plan at 5768 Andrews Road. They have stated that Dollar General has agreed to over 15% of the store will be frozen food and produce. The sign up front will be black and white rather than the standard yellow sign. They are willing to eliminate the 17 parking spaces on the north side for landscaping. They will also design the north drive and sidewalk for the handicap. They will consider benches in the right of way. Concern stated that MSP is a developer, not a store. Discussion turned to how we deal with Dollar General if we need to. The preliminary site plan was approved. Ended at 6:37 p.m.
Thank you. Any other board and committee that met?
Mr. Morris, I was at the community development as well.
I'm sorry. You're ready to work.
Yes, I was.
I will put that in my notes.
Okay, hearing no other board and committee reports, open to the public to speak. John, this is your opportunity to come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record. This is not a back and forth between you and council. It's merely an opportunity for you to make a statement and have it put into the record. If you would like to come to the lectern, now is your opportunity.
Earl Curry, 7523 Salida Road. I think it's very, very important that we really push a moratorium on the RTOP. As everybody knows, that seems to be the point of contention as to what to be done in these properties. Summers Group is taking advantage of that. As our law director advised us that Dollar General could try to take advantage of that. And I don't like the city being held hostage by developers. I like the city controlling what it wants to do. And so I'm begging council to put an emergency declaration on this RTOP so that we can make the right decision with the PUD and the right decision with what needs to happen in the city. When it comes to the PUD, you're correct. There's a mixed feeling amongst all of us. And when we talk, we meet, we are between a rock and a hard place. And we were put there because we have a developer threatening us between an RTOP and a PUD. And it's an awful place to be, and you lose either way. And we're trying to minimize our losses. That's why I really need to do something to stop this RTOP, stop the lead, so that we can control our city again. That's where we're at. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Susan Schick, 7539 Salida Road. So when I read an ordinance, and I don't have anything with me, because I'm directed to work, so I didn't even know we were having this meeting tonight. I've gotten a text that please try to show up. So unfortunately, I don't have it with me, but I highlighted a few things about the ordinance that had to do with the PUD and this RTARP and whatnot. And there's a lot of discussion there about what it brings to our city as safety. And I'm telling you, when I hear a lot of this, I don't see that these things are providing safety in our community. I saw that fire the other day. It was horrific. There was 3 fire departments there. So I say to myself, we're going to now have more housing, that we have to take care of all these people. I don't see how our city can take on all of this. That's it.
Jeff Schick again, 7533 Salida. I wanted to comment on something the law director said. I think I attended every single meeting that either the community had or that was held in this room with regard to the Dollar General, and not once in the Dollar General did the 15% come up. The 15% shelving space came up after the conversation that was had with Mr. Bittner, Mr. Johnson, the mayor, and the Dollar General representatives. So it was Dollar General who threw the 15% out, is my understanding.
No,
Absolutely.
no, it was in there before.
It was planning.
You can see.
It was the lady.
And then the secondary, thank you. And then a secondary comment is that big or little? What is 15% in a Dollar General? What does their normal store have? Are we getting anything different? Are we getting just smoke and mirrors? I don't know that. Might be, we should go walk down and find out before we let them go farther down the path and see what they have as far as fresh food shelving, frozen food shelving at their stores already. I just don't know what the 15% means. Thanks.
Salida. I just wanted to clarify something that Mr. Lyons said. He talked about Ardart being the possibility behind Dollar General. That's true in the existing code. Of course, if the PUD passes with this amendment up to Sharon, I believe that means they could do any kind of housing they want based on this PUD. That would be included. Any of the housing that's in the PUD would be included in the Dollar General property that passes.
May I?
Actually, I want to clarify one thing, that the PUD would only go into effect if it was applied to that property. The PUD is only an ordinance. It is not applied to a property until it has been approved to be applied to the property based on a development plan.
Right, and they have a plan that is been circulated that has what looks like 3-bedroom housing behind the Dollar General, which would require the PUD to be in place for them to do that. Otherwise, their only option is the Ardart. And if the moratorium's passed, that option goes away. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Do you have something else you want to add, Mr. Lyons? You look
I'm not sure.
perplexed.
Well, they have a proposal for the Dollar General for land behind that they want to put the Dollar General right now. By senior housing. Their top area. Setback, whatever.
Right.
They could put that in. After the Dollar General goes in, still there, they could apply. With no moratorium or the moratorium expired. Then they could apply, they have seen citizen housing there.
Correct.
Or they could also ask to have the PUD apply for the project. So
Allowing housing.
they could do either. The city, and I want to speak to council, but I think that, well, I have to speak for the administration. The administration thinks that the whole development of the PUD is just a little sensitive requirement. And the church area is part of that area. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I just.
But I think I'm close.
Yeah, somewhat it does. I'm just trying to clarify, if the moratorium was passed on Ardart and the PUD did not pass, the only thing that could go behind Dollar General is a commercial business based on current code. Is that accurate or not? So I've read all the codes myself. So
Say that again.
if a moratorium is placed on the
A
Ardart,
moratorium, once again, can only be for a certain period of time.
I understand.
Right.
I'm giving
Okay,
you my.
but during that moratorium period, if it's not challenged in court and a court overturns it, or if it's upheld, but during that time, they could not apply to put senior housing there. They would have to do that first but still tools that are available to a developer.
The tool available to us are a moratorium to stop the RDR for now, behind Dollar General. And if the PUD doesn't pass, they can't do housing. That's all I'm trying to clarify, because you referenced that they can do the RDR back there, which they can, as if that's the only option for housing. It's not. If
They
the
have
PUD
not-
was to pass, they get other housing.
To my knowledge, they have not applied for secret housing.
No, they just have renderings showing 3-bedroom apartments behind there.
No, the latest that was passed tonight by planning and zoning
No, I
is,
understand.
okay, is just the Dollar General with green space behind it. Now,
Right now, but they
how
have
long-
renderings showing 3-bedroom apartments behind
they
it.
did at one point.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
they
what
did.
that's what I'm
All right,
saying.
we've really gotten to a back and forth here. Let's move on.
Sorry about that.
So is that correct? If a moratorium is placed on RDR and the PUD does not pass, then at least for now, wouldn't be an ability to pursue housing behind Dollar General. That's the.
They could still seek rezoning of the property, so that is still an
Correct,
option. So
Correct.
there's
But
still
there's
other
some more
avenues.
obstacles in their way.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't want to do it.
Stop.
Al Fisher. RTAR, PUD. Let's, okay, maximum density is one part. Setback is equal part. Now, the developer Summers made a comment, which is simply not true. He commented that you could put 118 of senior apartments on that corner. Well, in a vacuum, if it was just density, yeah, that would be true. But it's not. Density has no more weight as an ordinance limiting a 55-foot front yard setback. Fact is, under our TARP, Summers cannot put those buildings without a variance any closer than 55 feet. He wants 20. Okay, so our TARP's not worse than the world. But you just can't take the density in isolation. You have to take the entire chapter along with the setbacks, along with the side yard setbacks, along with the rear yard setbacks. Now, the developers are gonna, or actually, they're going for off the radar now. That's why we wanted. Oh, we struck a balance on setbacks, but don't kick the baby out with bathwater just because you can. Look, you're looking at that high density number per acre. One does not negate the other. For all the rest of the parts of that chapter. And that's all I'm, I'm taking up enough time. And that's what we try to do. You take the comprehensively, not just the density. Al Fisher, 5426 Coronado.
One more, real quick, test Teresa, 7373 Salida. With the moratorium on the discount stores, part of that was, it was 6 months, right? I believe 6 months. Part of, and again, I don't have it with me, but there was, that 6-month period was, so some research or studies can be done as far as impact to the community. What has or has not been done, or what is planned to, what has been determined? I don't know how many months it's been to. Is there a plan to research what some of those impacts maybe for those stores? And that, I mean, open-ended, but I haven't heard that. I haven't heard of any studies or anything that has been done.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Mr. Gray, 7574 Delia Drive, against the flood for moratorium.
But the only thing me standing up here tonight is the mayor's comment in his reports that we currently will have no service director, because that was Holly's job as appointed by the mayor, and no financial director. So with that in mind, I hope City Council will encourage the mayor to hire 2 positions, because currently we only have 5 service employee members, and I thought we had 7 upon Brent Moore's retirement. So with that in mind, I'll be more cognitive of financial bearings of appropriations going forward for 2 new hires, potentially 2 more for service department to encompass what we had prior to Brent Moore's retirement. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close this portion of the meeting to the public. Legislation before council, resolution number 2022-R-19, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-19. A resolution confirming the reappointment of Catherine Roos to the Board of Zoning Appeals and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Before I can go on, you want to make a statement that for any of the appointments to any of the boards or commissions, whether they're reappointments or new, I do have an expectation that if you have a problem with any of the applicants, that you speak up and make sure that you have spoken in council in a public hearing, rather than just voting. Okay? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Motion for
Second.
passage by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-20, if you please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-20. A resolution confirming the reappointment of Ray Dealing to the Board of Zoning Appeals and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend.
Seconded.
Motion to suspend by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-21, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-21. A resolution confirming the reappointment of Renee Schaefer to the Board of Local Tax Review and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion? Motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Motion for passage by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-22. Please read it by its title.
A resolution confirming the reappointment of Carol Stefanski to the Board of Local Tax Review and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion on this one?
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Motion for passage by Mr. Bittner,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-23, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-23. A resolution confirming the reappointment of Alfred J. Busher to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Any discussion?
I think Mr. Bush has been a great asset to
Motion to suspend. Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion to approve by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-24, please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-24. A resolution confirming the reappointment of James M. Lyons as Law Director and Assistant City Prosecutor, affirming his contract, determining compensation, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion?
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Morris for suspension. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Heck, yeah.
Motion for passage. Second.
Seconded.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Heck, yeah. Resolution. Well, I wasn't allowed to, make the motion to, suspend the rules or
I had to
anything.
fill his
like that.
shoes.
So
I
I
had to fill his
I
shoes.
appreciate that, because, normally I do that very quickly before he changes his mind. Resolution number 2022-R-25, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-25. A resolution authorizing the mayor and administrative director to enter into a consultant agreement with Tefanic Iosu and Associates LLC for labor relations, human resources, and or other legal counseling services, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion? Is there any motion?
Motion to suspend.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Moore. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Motion for passage by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-26, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-26. A resolution confirming the appointment of Joseph M. Gurley as city prosecutor and assistant law director, affirming his contract, determining compensation, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion?
Motion to suspend. Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion for passage by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-27, you can please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-27. A resolution accepting and adopting the Lake County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Litigation Plan, HMP, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion?
I can kind of fill you in on this. This is an update to what they call the hazard mitigation plan. And it's updated every 5 years with communities so that we remain eligible for funding under FEMA's hazard mitigation grant program.
there a limit on this? Like, needs to be submitted by?
We should pass it prior to year end. But there was a 200-page written plan that I don't think I shared with people. But this is, like I said, something that's approved every 5 years, that, you know, we're all being all the way counted.
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-28, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-28, a resolution confirming the reappointment of Ron Donnell to the Civil Service Commission.
Any discussion?
Motion to suspend.
Motion made by Mr. Morris to suspend, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-29, if you could please read it by title.
Resolution number 2022-R-29, a resolution confirming the appointment of Bree Moore to the Parks and Recreation Board.
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Pause to let you rest your hand for a moment. I just wanted to thank all the volunteers who are serving on our boards and commissions. We cannot function as a city without you guys. So everyone who has volunteered and serves on those, you are very much appreciated by council and by the administration. So thank you. Yeah, you guys are ready. Resolution number 2022-R-30, if you please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-30, a resolution confirming the appointment of CT Consultants Inc. as city engineer, affirming their contract, establishing their compensation, and declaring an emergency.
Any discussion?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson for suspension of the rules. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Resolution number 2022-R-31, if you could please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-31, a resolution authorizing the mayor and director of administration and finance to enter into the First Amendment to easement and assignment agreement for the tower area behind City Hall and declaring an emergency.
Would the law director like to speak on this one?
Yes. During the past 6-7 months, there's been discussion with the current group that in ownership rights to the lease. They originally wanted to gain an additional 120 square feet in order to locate the dish network, and they were planning to that. If they had done that, then they were going to eliminate insisting that they had the right. Get this, but how they put it foot down. But during that time period, Clearwire was behind it. It's moved, and revenue was 50% from Clearwire was paid to the town. It's moved. Now they want to put the dish network, if it's still willing to go in there, into that area. It's a 600 square feet area that we approved back in 2006. That easement lease area through the year 2035. That happens, then there'll be an additional $500 a month revenue to us. Replace the Clearwire. But it will also provide a clearly marked area where an additional provider of services that will be made. I thought that this was a matter of some urgency, but I sent final drafts to the attorney and not hear back from him with a small change. So I think that this would probably. You want to pass it the way that the legislation reads, is that it would have to substantially conform to the 19 pages that is attached to it. And really, it's just some lines marking where this area would be and where the exit is. It's ready to.
Any discussion?
Motion suspend.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner to suspend. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Moore,
Is there a chance their attorneys could come back and say, no, we want something different? And we have to worry about an amendment on this?
If they wanted to do something substantively different, we would have to come back. It's really, it's gone through 3 or 4 different ramps, so make sure that we're all clear. I asked Record Receipt to make sure that the legal description matches. The area that go back there extends right up to the Stanford. It was put in just right outside of that. Right up to that. So I think
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion for passage.
Second.
Made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Another one we've all been waiting for. Ordinance number 2022-0-19, if you could please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-19, third reading, amended. An ordinance creating chapter 1255, planned unit development, PUD district of the codified ordinances.
Discussion.
I would like to make an amendment to once again make it north of Linden. Linden North, to only apply the PUD at this time.
I would second that.
So motion made by Mr. Bittner to amend the PUD to north of Linden, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
No.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. The amendment has passed. Any further discussion or amendments?
Further discussion. So earlier, it was asked by a member of the public to address why I would change my vote. And I want to explain. originally, I've been a firm believer and I've said it, I believe there is a need for a PUD. I have said that. I believe for the future of our city, the application is now. I don't disagree, we need a master plan, we need to work on what we want this to look like. But unfortunately, we are in this tough spot at this point. Me personally, looking to the future, I feel better townhomes, owner occupied. I made that clear. I think that they have more at stake. You mentioned about families. I think families coming into this community is a great idea. I'm one of them. I'm not opposed to that. Out of the choices we have, I feel this is best for our community and the residents that are here.
As I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of back and forth between rentals. What do renters bring to the community? What does homeownership bring to the community? Townhomes versus apartments versus 55 and older versus families. Regardless of what we decide, it's going to change the trajectory of our city. It's going to bring in people. Owner occupied, I feel brings us people who are going to be willing to participate in our boards within our city, to have a reason to get involved and be giving back to their community. With people working from home, not only do I see this as an opportunity to have an increase in property taxes and things like that, but if we can get people who are going to buy these, who are going to be working from home, we're going to need to get the income tax revenue and different things like that. We'll have people shopping at our stores. We'll have people spending more money in our community. I feel owner occupied with probably higher incomes are going to be spending more money in our community than people who are on fixed incomes.
What else?
When we started this many months ago, and I'm not going to comment on any type of development, but when we went to CT Consultants and said, can you put an overlay district? And this by itself is an overlay district for either properties that are already developed, and let's say somebody tears something down, or properties that are not developed. When we look at what's not developed in the city, it's about 2%. When we look at the dimensions of those properties, they are all different dimensions. We can talk about acres, we can talk about the lots that go down campus. How this helps us with a master plan or anything is overlay. If I want to buy the lot on Andrews Road, I will have certain setbacks, but I'll also be able to apply this somehow. So it's, we shouldn't just think what's going to happen at the church or on the corner. It's what can happen down Andrews Road too. That's my 2 cents.
And I will say that that's probably my biggest concern, is that what could happen down Andrews Road, because now you're talking about even more high density housing. That has been my issue from the beginning. I have always despised high density housing. That hasn't changed. I've heard people here talking that we don't listen to residents. Well, apparently we only don't listen to residents if we do the opposite of what one group says, but if we do what the other group says, we're not listening to all the residents. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. I mean, we have so many residents here that have differing opinions. And I'll tell you right now that the vast majority of the residents don't give a rat's ass what goes there. They don't. They really, really don't. What they care about is that it looks nice, that it is cohesive to our city. That's really what they care about.
they don't care one way or the other about housing because it doesn't affect them directly. Right now, they care about what's going on with their pocketbooks, things like that. That's what's their priority, not what type of housing goes where, whether it's owner occupied or not. That's what truly the majority of residents in this city think. I've talked to a lot of residents, not just the same ones that show up every meeting to tell us that we're not listening. Okay? Well, my opinion hasn't changed. I still don't like high-density housing. You know, I allowed this to come back up because we were being given a choice between two types of high-density housing. You can agree or disagree whether we should have this discussion again. I am perfectly fine having a discussion every damn time. I will let stuff come back up if people want to have that discussion. There is nothing against having a discussion about any legislation. I am proud to let people have that discussion. Means we haven't decided an action. And for people to say, well, we shouldn't let people have that discussion. We shouldn't let us bring it back up. That's crap. I'm sorry. There is nothing wrong with it. So no, I still don't like this. I still do not like high density housing, but I am glad that we're still having this discussion. Now, I know Mrs. Thompson mentioned something about incorporating businesses, mixed use in there. I don't know if we want to have that discussion now.
Like to amend that we add mixed use into that.
As a requirement.
Yes.
Are we talking about a percentage of it? Are we talking about like frontage on a street? Are we talking what, how would we incorporate that? Or do we need to have another meeting to discuss that in more detail?
Probably. I didn't put that much thought into it, but I mean, right now, I think something with a mixed use in that corner along with it would cut down the look of the high density. It would take away from some of the living there, but it would give more attraction. It would bring in more businesses to the area as well. Anyone have any other suggestions about?
I agree with you, Kathy. I believe the mixed use would do just exactly what you're saying. Although I'm also going to agree with Mr. Johnson that I don't want to see high density, but that would make it more palatable.
The opinion on that, we're talking about this one specific property. Obviously, we've tailored it to that at this point. He's already said no. He's not entertaining mixed use. So at this point, what do you want? Do you want the high density with the seniors? This is just my opinion. What does he want? Or what do you want at this point?
I will argue that what she's stating is that mixed use in any PUD, which could be anywhere from Linden North. So that could be any part of Andrews Road. And the requirement would be the same. It's not, we can make that requirement specifically for that property. If we're going to add that into this at some percentage or some frontage or something, then it would apply to any property that could fall under that PUD. If a PUD got applied to those properties. So it's not specifically to that property.
If I understand it, you're adding in or another potential development.
No, this would be a requirement of some portion of that property, whatever the PUD property became, to have a mixed use feature to it. Yes.
Our current zoning mixed use is already an approved developments in this area. So if the developer was willing to do mixed use, they could have already done so.
That is correct, but it would not allow them to put other housing behind it.
all have to be mixed use. That would be the only opportunity to have any type of housing at that location or any location within the business district.
Trying to clarify what we're talking about.
It seems to me we need a little bit more discussion, and I don't
Okay.
think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't either.
And I like the idea of including all of Andrews Road if we're going to be doing something mixed use. But we may need to be more specific as how much this is.
Okay. There was a motion, is there a motion to send this to a committee of the whole meeting? Motion made by Mrs. Thompson,
Second.
second by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
No.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore,
No.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Okay, this will be sent to a committee of the whole meeting that will be scheduled at the end of this meeting. Ordinance number 2022-0-20, second reading, if you please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-20, second reading. An ordinance ratifying the collective bargaining agreement with the full-time firefighters and authorizing the mayor and administrative director to execute a written contract with the Mentor-on-the-Lake firefighters, IAFF Local 3049, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. So I have a question. I just want to make sure that this is clear. This has been agreed to by the firefighters.
Correct,
This has been signed by their union representative.
correct,
Is a legally binding signature, as long as we approve it and sign it.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to suspend.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner for suspension, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
No.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson for passage. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson,
Aye.
Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-22. Please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-22, second reading. An ordinance, an ordinance establishing a 6-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for zoning and or occupancy permit approvals for elderly apartments in the area designated as the RTOP area in the city of the Mentor-on-the-Lake zoning ordinances, and the issuance of such approvals in the city of Mentor-on-the-Lake, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion. Yes.
I feel if we want to examine, should we have art and senior permissible housing or not? Then we need to have the zoning take a look at it, and I would keep it a little different. Because moratoriums expire and then we're right back having these conversations all over.
Anybody else? Is there any motions?
Motion to send it to committee. Second.
Excuse me, discussion, please. Rather than just automatically send this, the moratorium, the 6-month moratorium to committee, why not approve the moratorium for 6 months? Have the zoning committee look at placing this permanently as getting rid of the RTARP area.
All right, I'm going to propose that my recommendation would be to pass this moratorium tonight. Mr. Lyons, if you could draft legislation redefining the RTARP area to between Salida and Linden on the west side of Andrews Road, basically covers Andrews Place, and that's it. Something to that effect. Then we'll have that discussion on how big the RTARP should be from there. that work?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you. Now, if I could, I'd like to motion to suspend so that we can go forward.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Morris. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
No.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore,
No.
Mr. Shaboo,
No.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye, the motion fails. All right, moving on to old business. Is there any old business tonight? New business. I do have some new business. First of all, the December 27th meeting. I'm assuming you guys want to enjoy Christmas and not have a meeting that day. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Well,
All right, is there a motion to cancel the January 27th meeting?
so they.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. All right, so the December 27th meeting will be canceled. Okay, open to the public to speak. Is there any other new business? Hearing none, we'll open this portion of the public to speak. If you'd like to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address for the record.
Kristen Payne, 5595 Walnut Street. I just want to express my gratitude to everybody, for everybody who's tried to donate to me, who's out and everything. Not really good about breaking the wheel, everything everybody's done for everybody. I can't express my gratitude for me. I'm so grateful.
We're just thankful you guys are okay. Anybody else?
Hi, Susan Lenahan, 7359 Salida. I appreciate all the consideration on the PUD. I just want to reiterate, the developer doesn't dictate what we do in this town. You guys do. You set the codes, they have to work within those codes. So I keep hearing the developer said they won't do this, the developer said they won't do that. That's not our problem. And as it relates to the corner, that's a very desirable piece of property. So I understand a private property owner can do whatever they want to do with their property, but it has to be within our codes. They can't do what they want to do outside of our codes. We should not be changing them to accommodate that on a parcel that will be very attractive to a number of other entities. If she doesn't want to do it, that's her priority. She's put it up, pay her taxes, and off we go. That's the deal. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Anyone else? I knew you would miss an opportunity. You missed the first round, so I figured you were out for this
I
one.
left a perfectly good workshop, wood shop. I'm very much in favor of the fact that you decided to give the PUD a little more discussion as far as some of the details. And I go along with Mr. Bittner, we're in a tough situation. We've got a developer that's kind of leveraging the senior citizen thing to get what they want. And we don't have a lot of infinite choices. So we're in damage control. And I want to reiterate that if we gotta go for high density, the owner occupied is pretty clearly the way to go. I would ask that you reconsider removing the amendment that was put in that gave them the opportunity, simply by request, to go to a 20-foot setback. I think we should revert to the original setback in zoning for residential properties. Other than that, there's not a lot more discussion. We've been through it a million times, but owner occupied condos with a, whatever it is, 45 or something foot setback. That may be what we have to settle for. One more thing. There was a deal back here someplace about Did the thing for CP consultants, did that just get approved? Yeah. I think that's unfortunate. I've been indirectly and sometimes directly dealing with CP for over 30 years. And it isn't that they're incompetent. It's just I feel that we're being gouged on the price that we're paying for what we're getting from them. And we talk about going for bids on the lake restoration, this and that. Why do we just keep renewing the company that's really not playing all that fair? And I'm basing this legally on the fact that they're charging us $38,000 to oversee a very minor construction project here at the police station. So I'm thinking that sooner or later, somebody ought to get some thought. Now, I know Al Butcher has a lot of construction experience. I would defer to him as far as the ongoing work and what's gone before and so on. But personally, as a contractor myself, I find that to be an exorbitant price tag for very little that they have to offer.
Anyone else? Yeah, we'll close this portion of the meeting to the public. Announcements and settings of meetings. I did want to discuss the scheduling of the organizational meeting for January, so we can go ahead and get that on people's calendars this far in advance before you people start, planning your like holidays or something. It's going to propose January 3rd, 7 p.m. It's a Tuesday. So we know the room's available. That work for everybody?
Yes.
What time?
7 p.m. Yeah, I'll just keep it at 7. That work for the mayor?
Yes.
The organizational meeting will be January 3rd at 7 p.m. Yeah, we need to do a committee of the whole meeting. What works for people? I don't have the calendar up there. So you're saying the next week, the 14th, that's reserved from 6 to 8.
About 15.
15th is open. How do you guys feel about the 15th? 7 p.m.? No, you can't do the 7 p.m. Can you 6?
15.
So you got another meeting on the 15th.
What's wrong with?
14th, the room's occupied, 6 to 8.
Well, then. All right, November 15. I'll just tell them.
I would go the 21st. Monday, the 21st, if that's better.
21st?
Could do that.
No, that's my daughter.
15th. Dead bodies are appealing.
No, she's planning to do it. I can't be.
She invited us, we could all have it there, as long as we announce it.
I'll take the 15th over the 21st.
Damn, I was thinking we were gonna get a dinner or something.
No.
That's committee, the whole 6 p.m. or 7?
Which day are we on now, the 15th?
15.
The 15th, did we want 6 or 7?
7.
7,
Yeah.
all right, 15th, 7 p.m. Committee of the whole. Okay, other meetings.
Community development was originally, we talked about doing it on the 16th, but the Envision Group can't make that date. So
Yes,
we're headed for the 17th at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. on the 17th. Community, community development.
Is that December or
November, we're still in November. meetings. Community development, November 17th, 7 PM. Committee of the whole, November 15th, 7 PM.
I thought we said 6 o'clock.
We can't do it at 6. The agenda meeting is at 6.
We could do it at 6.
We can do it. We've done meetings like that before. dual meetings.
That's fine, then.
You want to do it at 6?
Oh, yeah, there's no council meeting the following week. That's right.
That's on the calendar.
That's
Well, I
fine.
think it's on there just.
Yeah, we'll do it, leave it at 6.
So
Community
6.
development,
There's
6
council
PM.
meeting on the 22nd.
Yeah, we have council meeting on the 22nd.
Yeah, the council.
We do have. We're in December, we're in November.
Yeah, we still have one on the 22nd of November.
We still have one on the
Yeah.
22nd?
Yeah, the only one we're canceling is the 27th of December.
So what time do we want to set this for? 6 or
6
7?
p.m.
6. 6 for
6:05.
community development.
6:05.
I'm just.
Go back to sleep.
We can handle that.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Could you go over those meetings? We can't hear you and they're not posted generally.
Committee of the whole, November 15th at 7 PM. Community development, November 17th at 6 PM. Everybody get that now? Okay. Any other meetings? Kevin? Your special committee, how's it coming along? Are you gonna have any legislation before the end of the year?
Let's meet, because we got that one piece we wanted to move forward, we could go with that.
Up to
Not
you.
the agenda, not the, yeah, but she's, I haven't got her for that. But the other portion was dealing with the moratorium for the dollar stores, remember? And what we
Yes.
wanted to put in as far as
Permanent.
a limit, right? That's what we were gonna, so let's go over that.
When?
Let's do. Who's here the 17th?
The community development on 17th, so.
I know it's 6.
Yeah.
I'm saying, why can't we do it after? If we're already here, it's gonna take us, we're literally gonna come up with what we want to put in.
Okay.
I want you guys to look over discussion of elimination versus number limiting. You know what I'm saying? We talked about altogether taking it out,
Prohibited.
prohibiting versus keeping a number for the ones that are technically here. Just look at it,
Well, they're kind of grandfathered in.
not if something were to happen.
Okay.
That's, just look at it.
So
That's-
you want to meet after the community development meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
we'll do that aspect. If I, maybe if I can get a hold of her ahead of time,
I'm okay with that. Is Dave, you're okay? Michelle?
That's fine.
so we'll start it at 7.
It's like watching a ping pong match here.
The special committee as a whole. November 17th, special committee as a whole, 7 PM. So we could have this,
Okay.
that part of legislation, right?
The special committee is going to meet at 7 PM after the community development meeting on November 17th. Anything else? Next regular agenda meeting is also November 17th at 6 PM. The regular meeting of council is November 22nd at 7 PM. We have scheduled the organizational meeting for January 3rd at 7 PM.
Motion for adjournment. sir.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Morris to adjourn, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. You just got out all that. Oh, God, I have to sign all that now.
Are you driving tonight?
Oh,